Beyond the Bell. Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
We're about 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day on this Monday. Scarlet Fu and Katie Greifeld here, counting you down to the closing bell, and here to help us take you beyond the bell with a global simulcast, Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec. Welcome to all of our Bloomberg audiences across television, radio, and YouTube. Carol, there have been 17 weeks in which the S&P 500 has, or I should say in the past 17 weeks, there's 16 weeks in which the S&P 500 has closed higher on a Monday, and today's looking like it's going to be one of those.
Interesting, right?
Yeah, what does it mean?
Wait,
I don't know what
Can we do this on a Monday? Can we do this
Wasn't
on a
last
Monday?
week? Wasn't last week the first one in 16, Scarlet?
Last week was the 1 week in which it didn't close up. I'm not sure what to make of this either, except that lately, since the Israel-Hamas war began, there was definitely reluctance to be long on a Friday. So maybe there's a little bit of a make back on a Monday, but that doesn't account for 17 weeks.
There's
right?
a lot of stuff. Fed meeting, Apple earnings, jobs report, right?
That's true.
It's a
big
lot of
week.
stuff.
Treasury refunding, that's happening too.
Nice job sliding that in.
Katie, we just spoke to Max Wasserman over at Miramar Capital, who talked today about this being a relief rally. He said, people were concerned going into the week, and as you mentioned, Scarlett, that things could escalate even more than they did between Israel and Hamas. But I question why we're seeing the bond market moves that we're seeing today, and we're also seeing the equity market moves.
Yeah, of course, you see that sell-off continuing in the bond market, even as we get the Treasury's borrowing estimates, less than expected, still, amazing amounts of money, but still that wasn't worth too much when you look at what happened in yields afterwards.
Yeah, just a bit of a leg lower in both the 2-year and the 10-year, but not enough to change the overall direction. There's the closing balance, and it does look like we're going to finish higher on the day. It doesn't look that way for the month, but that's a separate story. We have the S&P 500 up by 1.6%, or I should say 1.2%. I'm looking at the Dow Jones up by 1.6%, and the Nasdaq gaining 1.2% as well. And the laggard here is the Russell 2000 up by 2/3%, but notably higher as well.
All right, we're going to get a breakdown into the groups in just a moment. Some individual movers. We're watching some earnings. But if I look at the S&P 500, guys, 399 names, Scarlet, to the upside, 102 to the downside, 2 unchanged. So investors willing to do some buying today.
Willing to do some buying. That shows up in the industry groups as well. 24 industry groups. The only sector in the red right now is the autos and components one. That includes Tesla, off by 4.1%. See that red bar at the very bottom? That's the autos group. Everything else in the green, including, let's see, 4 groups that have gained at least 2%. Retail, telecoms, and transportation leading the way here.
All right, guys, let's get to some of the individual gainers in today's session. And McDonald's is definitely on that list. Up 2.5% at its highs, finishing the day with about a 1.7% gain. Has to do after it came out with its quarterly update. Third quarter sales and profits, it was a beat thanks to higher prices and movie-inspired ads. U.S. customer traffic, though, it did dip for the first time this year. So just something to keep in mind that not every report. What?
Okay, I'm sorry to cut you off. Romaine's not here, so I'm going to interrupt you instead.
What? No way.
Why are people freaking out about Ozempic and stuff when it comes to the donut places, but not McDonald's?
Donut places.
Like Chris, I don't know. I'm just asking a question. I don't know.
That's a fair
Because
question.
we still eat burgers. Burgers are protein.
Okay.
They have salads,
Donuts are
they
not
have water.
protein.
Like they
have some good
have
pricing power, which is also
They have water.
important.
They also have shakes. They're delicious.
and French fries.
And French fries are vegetables.
All right, comp sales also a beat. I'm
Sorry.
moving on. I'm ignoring the substitute Romaine today. Comp sales a beat, up 8.8% in the period versus 7.8% average of the estimate we polled here at Bloomberg. Delivery digital channels also contributed to sales growth. It was its slowest sales growth, though, of the year. So just a little bit of a caveat. Western Digital, number one gainer in the S&P 500, up 7.2%. It was up more than 13% at its highs today. The company said it would separate its HDD and flash businesses into 2 public companies. It also reported its first quarter results and gave a forecast. So investors liking some of that news, although not as enthusiastic as it was earlier in the session, as we said, up more than 13% at its highs. And then Amazon, this was an outperformer in today's session as well. We'll bring up the numbers for you. It was up about 3.9% in today's trade. Top in the NASDAQ 100, Fidelity Magellan adding Amazon to its investments, a new buy. They added about 9.14 million shares valued at $1.16 billion. So that was definitely a standout. Also, the analysts have been raising their price targets on the company since it reported. So there's some momentum in that one, you guys.
All right. Well, I was actually even though we were up on the day, had a pretty easy time finding in the S&P 500 stocks that did move lower. Scarlett, you talked about Tesla a little earlier. The worst performer on a points basis in the S&P 500, down 4.81% today. It closed at its lowest level since May, we should note. Panasonic Holdings earlier in the day reported that its automotive batteries operations fell to their first loss in the quarter in 3 quarters on lackluster demand for Tesla Model S and Model X. So that could have been one of the reasons it moved lower. We also saw BYD, it's China's top-selling car brand, did report record quarterly profits. So perhaps because a competitor did report some good numbers, especially in the wake of that recent earnings call where we heard a dour Elon Musk on the call. On semiconductor, the worst performer on a percentage basis in the S&P 500, closing down more than 20%, 21.77%. Biggest intraday drop going all the way back to March of 2020. The company gave fourth quarter forecast that was weaker than expected in terms of adjusted earnings and in terms of revenue. Similar reason we saw move lower for Revvity, closing down today, more than, 16%? Wow. The deepest intraday plunge since December of 2008 at its lowest down to 2002 levels at one point in the day. This after the company cut its revenue forecast for the full year, Scarlett.
Actually, it's my
Katie.
turn, Tim. Let's get to the bond market because this is really interesting here. We did get the Treasury come out with its net borrowing estimates. Net borrowing estimates for October through December for that quarter came in at $776 billion. That had been predicted at $852 billion. Even still, even with a little bit of relief there, maybe the Treasury is going to announce that they're going to have to sell less debt on Wednesday. You didn't see too much of a reaction in the bond market. That sell-off continuing. You can see 2-year yields up 3 to 4 basis points. 10-year yields, similar story, less so across the curve, but all told, pretty small moves, but just continuing that trend, Scarlett, of this sell-off, those marches towards higher yields.
Yeah, today's the stealth sell-off, but it's still happening, right?
Exactly.
As long as you see those yields moving up. You know, when it comes to U.S. earnings, we've seen the bulk of the numbers. I'm really excited about Apple because I can't wait to hear what the company has to say about China in particular with Chinese consumers. I wouldn't say souring on Apple devices, but the government certainly is souring on Apple devices.
And we are getting some evidence, Scarlett,
now.
that the Chinese consumers are souring on at least the latest high-end version of its iPhone. We're going to be talking about that with Mark Gurman a little bit later because it sounds like there's some real competition from Huawei.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it's interesting, right? Yeah, the increased competition in the domestic market. It's one of those markets that Apple has certainly, identified like so many other companies as a tremendous growth opportunity. So you do wonder if you have individuals there saying, nope, they're going to be buying. Although Mark has said to us that it's still considered kind of a coveted device, right? Apple device in China.
Super high end, but it's also not as sticky in China because a lot of the apps that they use there are over-the-top apps, right? These super apps that you can use equally well on an Android or an Apple.
Well, before we get to Apple, we do have some results from Pinterest coming out with their third quarter numbers. Third quarter revenue came in at $763 million. The estimate had been for $744 million. Third quarter EPS, though, 1 cent. Had been expecting a loss per share of about 10 cents over a year. You take a look at the third quarter adjusted EPS, that was 28 cents. The estimate had been for 20 cents. So a beat there, and you can see that reflected in the shares, toggling around a bit, but clearly higher, up by more than about 5%. And this was a company that needed it because coming into today's close, this company only up about 3% year to date, but clearly some good news here, at least in after hours initial trading.
You wonder if some of this, the big bounce in the aftermarket, up 5.5%, is because about 5% of the float was shorted. So maybe a little bit of short covering potentially. Keep in mind that this is a stock, 25 and change that it's closed at in today's session, but it is down more than 70% from its February 2021 high. So a lot of ground to make up if that was the more accurate valuation, if you will, or metric.
Yeah, I'm going through the press release here, and the company's CEO, Scarlett, Bill Reddy, saying that the company's seeing its best market fit at this point in years for Pinterest.
I still don't get this company and what it does and why people go to it.
I'm glad you said it and not me. Weddings and renovations.
I'm with you too.
The amount of time that I spend thinking about Pinterest relative to the amount that I hear about Pinterest is pretty skewed. But apparently, if you look at their monthly active users, 482 million. That is an 8.3% increase year over year, and it beats estimates. So people are clearly using it.
We gotta work on our vision boards.
Apparently,
I think.
Yeah. Who would have thought the business model would be, I'm going to monetize mood boards.
Oh, did I say it wrong? Mood board.
No, mood boards, vision
vision
boards.
boards.
Same thing.
It's whatever you want it to be.
I'm just going to mention real quickly, Tenet Healthcare also out, and that stock's up about 3% in the aftermarket following its quarterly update. So for more information, head to Bloomberg.com. And Pinterest, yeah, still up 6%. Scarlett, I'm with you. We'll try and figure out.
Yeah.
What we're supposed to do
in
with
fact,
this.
we'll get into it with Mandeep Singh next, right after the closing bell. That does it, right, for cross-platform coverage?
Yeah, that's a wrap. We'll see you guys again tomorrow beyond the bell. Join us at 4 p.m. Wall Street time.